He did not have far to go. Even he knew how many steps it was from the gate of his house. Exactly 730. Once, when he was far gone in his dreaming, he had counted them. At that time, he did not yet believe in these dreams of his, only chafed himself with their ugly but seductive audacity. Whereas now, a month later, he was beginning to look at them differently. And despite all those taunting monologues about his own powerlessness and indecision, he had grown used, even somehow involuntary, to regarding the ugly dream as a real undertaking, though he still did not believe himself. Now he was even going to make a trial of his undertaking, and at every step his excitement grew stronger and stronger. With a sinking heart and nervous trembling, he came up to a most enormous house that faced a canal on one side and Y Street on the other. The house was all small apartments inside and was inhabited by all sorts of working people: tailors, locksmiths, cooks, various Germans, girls living on their own, petty clerkdom, and so on. People kept coming and going, darting through both gateways and across both courtyards. 3 or 4 caretakers worked there. The young man was very pleased not to have met any one of them, and slipped inconspicuously from the gate directly to the stairway on the right. The stairway was dark and narrow, a back stairway, but he had known and made a study of all that before, and he liked the whole situation. In that darkness, even a curious glance was no danger. If I am so afraid now, what if it really should somehow get down to the business itself? He thought involuntarily, going up to the 4th floor. There his way was blocked by some porters, ex-soldiers, who were moving furniture out of one apartment. He already knew from before that a German, an official, had been living in that apartment with his family. It means the German is now moving out, which means that on the 4th floor of this stairway, on this landing, for a while only the old woman's apartment will be left occupied. That's good, just in case. He thought again and rang at the old woman's apartment. The bell jingled feebly, as though it were made not of brass but of tin. In the small apartments of such houses, almost all the bells are like that. He had forgotten the ring of this bell, and now its peculiar ring seemed suddenly to remind him of something and bring it clearly before him. He jumped. So weak had his nerves become this time. In a short while, the door was opened a tiny crack. The woman lodger was looking at the visitor through the crack with obvious mistrust, and only her eyes could be seen glittering from the darkness. But seeing a number of people on the landing, she took courage and opened the door all the way. The young man stepped across the threshold into the dark entryway, divided by a partition, behind which was a tiny kitchen. The old woman stood silently before him, looking at him inquiringly. She was a tiny, dried-up old crone, about 60, with sharp, spiteful little eyes and a small, sharp nose. She was bareheaded, and her colorless and only slightly graying hair was thickly greased. Her long, thick neck, which resembled a chicken's leg, was wrapped in some flannel rags, and, despite the heat, a fur-trimmed jacket, completely worn out and yellow with age, hung loosely from her shoulders. The little old woman coughed and groaned all the time. The young man must have glanced at her with some peculiar glance, because the earlier mistrust suddenly flashed in her eyes. Pardon my pronunciation of this, but Raskolnovic? A student. I was here a month ago, the young man hastened to mutter with a half bow, recalling that he should be more courteous. I remember, dearie, I remember very well that you were, the old woman said distinctly, still without taking her inquiring eyes from his face. And so again, ma'am, on the same little business, he continued, a bit disconcerted and surprised by the old crone's mistrust. Though maybe she's always like that, and I didn't notice it last time, he thought, with an unpleasant feeling. The old crone was silent for a moment, as if hesitating. Then she stepped aside and, pointing toward the door to the room, allowed the visitor to go ahead, saying, "Come in, dearie." The small room into which the young man walked, with yellow wallpaper, geraniums, and muslin curtains in the windows, was at that moment brightly lit by the setting sun. So the sun will be shining the same way then, flashed as haphazardly through his mind. With a quick glance, he took in everything in the room in order to study and remember the layout as well as possible. But there was nothing special in the room. The furniture, very old and yellow of wood, consisted of a sofa with a huge curved wooden back, a round table of an oval shape in front of the sofa, a dressing table with a mirror between the windows, chairs against the walls, and 2 or 3 halfpenny prints in yellow frames portraying German damsels with birds in their hands. That was all the furniture there was. In the corner, an oil lamp was burning in front of a small icon. Everything was very clean. Both furniture and floor were polished to high luster. Everything shone. Lizavida's work, the young man thought. There was not a speck of dust to be found in the whole apartment. Its wicked windows, who kept everything so clean, he continued to himself, and he cast a curious sidelong glance at the cotton curtain hanging in the doorway to the second tiny room, where the old woman's bed and chest of drawers stood, and where he had not yet peeked even once.